All right, so welcome to part two. I'm going to start this one off just overviewing everything I've done so far, why I'm doing some of the things, what we're already done, etc. Because I stink at the GoPro, and I watch back some of part one's videos and most of it's useless because the frame is off. So we've got super view on, so hopefully this will capture more things, but here we go. So this is the bike as it sits right now, kind of midway through the process. Started to try and organize some things. I have a bin of all the stock stuff that I'm not going to use again for the foreseeable future. And then I'm starting a spares bin for take to the races with me. Everything that I might need to replace on the bike in the event of a crash, consumables, stuff like that. Some stuff that's still out, I'm waiting on the fairings to come in, the race fairings, so that I can use that box and the bubble wrap and all that to get the stock stuff put away safely. To kind of walk through the bike, I'll try and go front to back with where we're at. So the front intake system, a ton of stuff lives in the front of the bike on these R1s or the newer ones with all of the electronics that they have. But a lot of it got taken off, but all the headlights, all the street type things are all taken off. I'm going to take this intake nozzle off and crack the case here, separate it so we can take the intake flap out. I already took the vacuum plug out of it, but that's just basically the intake at lower RPMs is more restricted for less noise on the road. It's just kind of a stock bike thing that we don't use for the racetrack, but we're gonna get that removed so there's cleaner, more unobstructed airflow in the bike. Got the stock steering damper off. There we go. Pretty certain it'll be this white plug. Yep, that'll be it there. So we'll find a way to button all this up after we plug in our main. It is electronically controlled. Basically, it adjusts the settings based on the speed that you're going. So we want a manual one. We're gonna go with the K-Tech damper here. I just need to find a bolt to put in to attach to the triple tree here. We are gonna be replacing the brake master cylinder. Already had the brake lever on there previously. We got our Vortex clutch lever installed. We got some race buttons installed to do away with the plastic huge pod on here since we don't need the blinker, indicators, high beams, horn, stuff like that. Let's go ahead and do the switch harness here so we can get this stock one off of there and get this all cleaned up. Nightmare, awesome. Holy cow, the amount of wires on this thing. Okay, so it's the gray one. We'll look at the routing. It goes around the ignition key, in between the frame, down here. Probably that big one right there. Yep. Okay. Horn is free. Double check. Yes, it is that one. There's one and two. All right. To get the horn removed, I'm delaying doing the ABS lines because it's just a mess and a lot of lines, hard lines. Plus I don't have the race direct lines in yet to replace them with. We did get the key elimination harness and these button pods all hooked up. So I tried to kind of follow the stock wiring. I redid a lot of these zip ties that were in here and tried to make sure everything was nice and neat, but everything's plugged in here. These two plugs are unplugged and empty, but we're gonna leave them in place because this kind of holds them in place. These are the two fans. So I've already removed the fans from the radiator. We don't typically use those in racing, just more airflow. We're gonna be on the track every time this bike fires up. We're really not gonna be sitting still, and when we are in parc ferme or something, or in the pits or on the starting grid, we usually will have a blower, like a leaf blower, to pass air through the radiator to cool off the engine. Case savers were already on the bike. So again, it was a street bike. I didn't ever intend to race it, but here we are a couple years later. The ECU, haven't quite decided yet what I'm gonna do, but either the GYTR metal harness cage that kind of protects it in the event of a low side on the left side of the bike, or I'll get the extension harness and route it underneath the seat since we're freeing up some room in here. So moving on to this area of the bike, I had previously done, you can see the Graves block off plates here. I believe this is called the AIS system. It's basically recirculates the air intake, or I don't know, honestly, I'm gonna speak out of turn here, but you take this off, it's an emissions restriction of some sort, but you take that off, put the block off plates, and it frees up a lot of space here. This is the vacuum hose to the intake flap up here, so it goes directly to the throttle bodies. I'm gonna block that off with one of these little nipples. Also gonna use another one of those to block off this, which is the fuel evaporation system. It's like a little canister box that sits right here and plugs in here. That goes to the throttle bodies as well, but it basically takes fuel evaporation from the fuel tank or something like that and recirculates it through the bike. So we took that off. We're gonna block it off here. I had already blocked off the intake hose here when I did the air intake for the airbox. These are the ABS lines you see running down the side of the bike. These are for the front brake lines that go up here and then over the radiator, so we'll be removing those. And then once we remove the rear, we're gonna take the ABS pump off itself, and I have an ABS delete module that will plug into the harness right here. If we have issues with that, we'll just plug in the ABS pump empty with no lines on it. Sometimes I've heard those can be finicky modules, but we'll see. This was the rear brake light switch. That's already been removed. Removed the kickstand and got the kickstand elimination dongle here plugged in already. Removed the front sprocket cover and used the stock rubber kind of case saver. So if we lose a chain, it doesn't demolish our case. Just put some washers on some bolts there. I did get the Vortex rear sets installed already. I needed that to lift the bike up to get the rear shock uninstalled. Got the whole rear of the bike cleaned up and stripped, ready for race fairings, essentially, pretty close. I still need to kind of consolidate and pin up these wires so they're up and out of the way, but got the rear brake light, and I had previously removed the exhaust servo motor that manages the exhaust flap on the stock exhaust, because I had put this 3/4 system Yosh pipe on here when the bike was stock before I decided to race it. So all that was already gone, which was nice, but a lot of free space in the tail section here. I do still need to wire up a hard line for my lap timer. Rear set installed. I may be going with the separate exhaust. That's why I haven't buttoned up the exhaust to the Vortex bracket here. I'm just kind of waiting to see what the plan is for that. I do have Samco hoses to put on, so we'll put those on. I'll get a high pressure coolant cap. I did take the top triple clamp off and ground out the ignition, which was an absolute pain in the butt, so that we didn't have the huge ignition key here in the way of things. Just kind of frees up more space and allows more room for, I'm planning on a fork mounted lap timer. Okay, so we took the intake nozzle off. There's just 4 bolts and there's 3 small bolts holding it together, both halves. You can just pry this apart, let the flap fall out. Now we have less restricted airflow through the intake, and we don't need this anymore.